Lubomila is a board member. She's a mentor. She's a TEDx talk speaker. She was listed Forbes 30 under 30, and I could go on with that list forever and ever. But before I keep talking, I would like to hand over the stage to Lubomila herself, and I'm looking very much forward to hearing her thoughts and her input. If you have questions for her, please feel free to write them in the chat window. We'll have time to answer them after Lubomila's talk. But now, Lubomila, the stage is yours.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for welcoming me here today. Hello to everyone. I'm calling in from Berlin. Hope all of you also have the same sun outside and can be setting up the scene for a good week. Today I'm going to be talking about paving the way towards a sustainable future through technology. Maybe a few words before I start about how I ended up doing what I'm doing. I do not have a sustainability or climate change background. I actually have finance and entrepreneurship background. I was in a business school and kind of did all the things that had nothing to do with sustainability, and I ended up having a bit of an epiphany in 2016 where essentially within one trip I kind of got quite shocked and excited about the idea that I could be doing something for climate change. It was a mix of a lot of different emotions, and what ended up happening was that I spent 1 year educating myself about climate change, and after that felt comfortable to set up a company. Today, Planning is a company based in Berlin. We work with a lot of big corporates through our technology, help them reduce their emissions on average by 15% a year. And essentially work on making sustainability a prime topic. The Greentech Alliance that was also mentioned earlier is a community of more than 1,000 different companies from all over the world working on sustainability. If anyone is working on sustainability from the listeners, super happy to have you on board. The community is for free, and it just takes a simple application form, because we do check our members for greenwashing. So we make sure that basically there's alignment in values. So for today, I've prepared a short presentation. I hope that's okay to share my screen. I would encourage you to put your questions in the chat. So anything that maybe gets unclear or too technical can be then covered in the Q&A session. I've tried to make it as pragmatic as possible. I really believe in kind of this approach as one that can allow for practical solutions to be implemented. So let's hope this is, also how you end up feeling at the end of the presentation. So paving the way through a sustainable future through technology. I first want to start with something that maybe is clear, maybe isn't. It's about the difference between role and responsibility. Maybe just for my information, can those of you in the audience just put in the chat if you work in the field of sustainability or you're more on the tech side, kind of what is your perspective, just with one word, tech or sustainability or both. And maybe I found this quite wonderful kind of definition that explains actually what really it means, is that role is something that is given to you by society or you've claimed for yourself, but it's kind of defining certain boundaries within which you sit. Responsibility, to the contrary, is a set of tasks, set of responsibilities, activities that you need to manage, but it's not necessarily always limited by your day-to-day. Maybe you're the CEO of the company, but you also really enjoy helping the design team sometimes with ideas or the creative process. Maybe you are a project manager and you want, you're focused on managing new projects, innovative projects in your company, but also often invited to do hiring interviews because apparently you're really good at that. Why does this matter? It's because in our society, we have actually been able to quite cleverly define a lot of different roles that all of us have. But sometimes we not always have necessarily understood, or the line of responsibility has become a bit blurred. So today, in terms of my talk, I would like to speak about what is the role of technology in addressing climate change and establishing itself as a sustainability benchmark, and also what is the responsibility. And the responsibility, in my opinion, goes a bit beyond what is the typical definition. So starting off with the role of technology, the first one is about optimization of processes. What you see here is what we do with planning in terms of external and internal data collection, and actually is essentially quite of a comprehensive piece of work that leads in a software solution to give companies this environmental layer of analysis that sometimes is missing within their day-to-day. We take financial data, we take a lot of data that is sitting within the company in some databases and other places. And we also combine this with external data that we have access to and we manage to then translate it into all of these different features that you see on the planning product. The role of technology historically has always been about optimizing processes. It has been about saving time and also making, our life a bit more to the point, focusing on the outcome, focusing on the results, and then using these results as what defines the next step. Now, when you talk about the topic of sustainability, we're also talking about, claiming this optimization of processes for good. And what this could mean is that you actually reduce the amount of resources used for something, or you actually define new use of materials in a more mindful way, or you analyze materials to find out which are more environmentally friendly. By optimizing processes, we can actually quite quickly identify where we're not necessarily doing so well. And I can tell you, by having worked in this field for quite a long time, unfortunately, there is less than 5% of the data that we have on this planet that is actually giving insights for environmental decision making, which can give you an understanding of how much work needs to be done. The second element is related to resource management. Technology has the role to enable us to manage better resources. We actually, through the Greentech Alliance, but also through our work in Plan A, have been analyzing hundreds and thousands of data points. And this is great because it gives you this shock wow factor to explain to you, like, where you're not necessarily particularly good to the environment, you're not particularly good to, the way you look at your processes. And at the moment, there's so much wasted resources just because of the fact that our processes are not optimized for their impact on the planet. So the way we analyze technology and the way we use technology, to analyze processes and our material use and our, way of producing, the way we do things, is not optimized with the wish for analysis on the environmental impact. And if you apply this to resource management, it's exactly the same thing. Here you see manufacturing, distribution, sales, consumption, product recycling, material sourcing, and so on. A loop which is actually not closed at the moment because a lot is being lost on the way. Only 15% of our waste is recycled. Consumption, we lose more than 40%, for example, of fruits and vegetables just before they even enter someone's house. And sales in retail and all of these distribution logistics elements at all of these stages, because of wasted opportunity for better resource management, we lose the opportunity to be more essentially sustainable. Another important element that I think is really well illustrated with the fashion example is engagement. This is the role of technology. We have plenty of social media to show us that engagement really is what drives the agenda, what drives revenue as well. And you can see it with, a lot of the acts of different companies. On the left-hand side, you see Zalando. This is a really big conglomerate, a big company that is actually, known for its e-commerce might. Since recently, they've made an announcement that until 2025, they're going to become net zero, and they're also going to be able to eliminate all unsustainable brands for their list of companies that they support and they sell the products of. This is not done yet, so it's still, an ongoing process. But what they've added now is actually the possibility for you to add certain features where you can essentially filter for the things that matter to you. animal welfare, reusing materials, reducing emissions, and so on. On the other side of the page, what you see is actually a website of a company called Vester, which is a new business that has 250 million funding, so doing pretty well. What their focus is on is essentially on enabling individuals to sell their clothes and expensive branded items. Doesn't matter from what kind of brand. It could be the most expensive to something that is maybe on the cheaper side, but you sell essentially to a second-hand market your products. And this level of engagement is like even deeply embedded into the business model, where sustainability becomes part of your offering, part of essentially the core product. No company should feel like they are not doing it right today because they're just in the beginning of their journey. There's no need for pointing fingers. No one is doing it fully right. And we're all on our path to become even better with sustainability. But these kinds of engagement elements allow for new and old models, old business models, to actually implement sustainability mindset within the product itself. And that is also the role of technology, because you hold the piece of information that can tell you if this product is implementing or impacting sustainability in a good or negative way. And, just a drop-down menu all of a sudden ends up giving the same level of knowledge to your customers. Another element of the role of technology is about equality. You might say that this is responsibility. In my opinion, it's actually something that is written in your job description, in your to-do list as a CEO, as a product manager, project manager, or any kind of position you hold in a company. What I've written here, no, I didn't write it, someone else did, is actually a quote from the United Nations University. And it explains about something called the skill premium. The skill premium is essentially the idea that, supply of skills could not be kept up by the demand. So what ends up happening is that for those that hold these skills, there's a certain premium. Companies are willing to pay more, and there's essentially a perpetual cycle that we are supporting that is related to economic inequality. Technology is allowing us to learn a lot of things on the day-to-day, and I think as any employer or as an employee, there is a needed responsibility, like there's a kind of a prerequisite, if you want to be a good one, to think about how you design your company in a way that it accounts for this inequality. Because you might wonder, but why does this really matter to sustainability? A sustainable planet is one that is actually with a sustainable society. So if you are building a team, if you're developing a company that is looking into anything related to sustainability, or you just want to kick off a project internally related to the topic, equality is a necessary element there, because it really is the defining way that will allow us to actually implement sustainability a lot faster and in a lot more of a responsible manner that reflects where society is at the moment. And unfortunately, inequality is growing by the minute. The second, and this is really important part of the presentation as well, is responsibility. I think the first part of the presentation is actually, about the fact that these things that I listed there are given, and a company cannot skip them. If you want to be aligned with the times, it doesn't matter if you sell clothes or if you sell mobile phones or if you sell software. Sustainability is a needed prerequisite for you to be successful, and also is something that the regulators are going to start requesting a lot of information on. So it kind of is a good way to prepare yourself for the future. Where you still have some leeway is your responsibility. And that's where you can decide to take a stance or you can decide not to. And the reason why it says, again, number one is because I don't want to say that one is less important than the other. I think both of these topics are equally as important. You as a person that works in a certain company, big or small, a person that owns a company or someone that is planning on building one, have the opportunity to claim this responsibility, but it's not necessarily what everyone is expecting from you. Again, engagement. The topic of engagement is quite important, and it's something that I hope I can stir up some debate with the example that I'm giving here is about Amazon, Apple, Facebook, and Google urging to ramp up, pro-climate action lobbying. There's been a lot of opinions about how sustainable these companies are, but I think they felt pressured to take a responsibility on this particular topic just because they want to be aligned with the times. There's a lot happening in the US on, asking the right questions about sustainability and about climate change. And this is an example of where this engagement kind of becomes a necessity just because these companies want to, of course, stay relevant. Another responsibility that, again, is not something that is requested from you, but I would highly recommend you consider this. If you, of course, work in a company that can afford to be thinking about this, is about money in the ecosystem. And that doesn't come in one shape and form. Actually, it comes in many. And what it does, essentially, what it means is that the tech industry has grown to a level that is surely for many to decide if this is sustainable, unsustainable, if this is a bubble, if it's not. But there is a certain level of responsibility that the industry has to essentially, act on its own way of behaving and making it more sustainable. And what money in the ecosystem means is essentially this idea of having investment within your company in sustainability. Maybe you have a sustainability officer. Maybe you decide to do an initiative with your team where you take some action to clean up some parks or do something that kicks off the sustainability agenda. Maybe you look at working with a company like Plan A or hire a consultant or work with someone that can enable you to be really with a clear agenda on the topic. That's one way of doing it. Another way of doing it is actually if your company, if it's really big one, has the vehicle to invest in companies, to look into investing in sustainability related ones. You might say, yeah, of course she's going to say that because you have this kind of a company. Well, it's more like actually if you compare the amount of funding that went into Europe or in the US or the whole planet, literally less than 3% went into the topic. And that shows that we're still focusing on investing in things that are focused on this optimization that I spoke about in the beginning, that is not necessarily focused on what is best for the planet, but what is best for saving money, saving resources, but not with the planet in mind. So another way to invest money in the ecosystem. And finally, I think this is maybe on a more individual level. Each one of us at the end of the day is an investor. We go to the supermarket and we invest in a lot of food. We go to a bookstore and we invest in our education, in our future. We go online and we also invest in clothes, in trips, and all these things. Well, if you put all these things together, at the end of the day, your purchasing power is actually able to influence a lot of how the economy is shifting towards sustainability. And if you're concerned for the planet, then you should be considering at each step of the way when you're making choices to also support the companies and also the individuals that are actively working on addressing climate change and are working on implementing sustainability at scale. Another responsibility and soon to be also a role is transparency. So what I wanted to represent here is a statistic from Wired magazine from 2021, which shows essentially the global greenhouse gas emissions caused by humans. You can see an interesting distribution here. So we use 1/4 of our electricity for plugging in. So this is electric product use. Our agriculture contributes to 18%. So this is all the plants and all the animals that we eat, all the lands that we clear out to allow for these animals to live there. Transportation also accounts for 16%, and then you have heating, cooling, refrigeration that account. And then the biggest one is actually the making things, cement, steel, plastic. So all of these things that at the end of the day contribute to everything else. So if you eat a piece of a cookie, or not a piece, hopefully a whole cookie, If you buy it packaged, let's say it's like a single package cookie, it is coming probably in a plastic, a piece of plastic wrapping that has been produced somewhere back down the line through the use of fossil fuels that then have been turned into plastic, and then this plastic has been shredded into little pieces, and then these pieces have led to this little cookie being available in your hand. So what does this tell us? We have quite of a complex ecosystem. We have a lot of decisions that we need to make on the day-to-day in order to optimize our processes, increase our revenue, maximize shareholder value, which is still, unfortunately, a prominent way of thinking in companies. And with all of this in mind, there's a lot of opportunity for actually making the unsustainable choice. Because historically, the unsustainable choice has been the one that has been made more often. This is why we're in this situation. Hence, of course, the bottom line, us having to make choices most likely would be unsustainable. So what can help us make these choices sustainable is actually adding transparency. What we do with our clients is that we give them an overview of how the fact that they produce clothes, the fact that they invest, because we work with also a lot of banks and venture capital funds, how the fact that they construct roads is unsustainable. And we show them this through data. And this data then becomes widely available in their companies and gives context to people. In some of these companies, it even becomes widely available to their consumers as well. And what this ends up essentially doing is that it allows for this transparency to then educate the decision maker on how they can make better decisions. Because I promise you, more than 50% of people on this planet probably would make the sustainable choice if only they knew. Because it's not about the cost in the sense that sustainable choices are not the more expensive ones. A single apple is cheaper than, an apple that is coming in a jar or some sort of a processed way. So, transparency leads to a lot of benefits. Here we get a bit more complex. It gets a bit more complex, I guess, but I'll explain it. And please let me know if you have questions. Add them to the chat about what I'm saying. But I think what is really important here to understand is that the creation of technology leads to externalities, and that's something that we often forget, but I think is incredibly important to be remembered in the context of us being responsible for our companies, our teams, our departments, or even our own projects. Doesn't really matter. When you decide to build a company, or when you decide to develop a project within your company, the one you work for, or you decide to set up a new initiative, what you really need to start calculating is externalities. And what I'm showing here as an example is actually the comparison between plastic versus paper versus reusable, non-woven propylene, which is actually the more durable option of the first one. And then you have the reusable polyethylene with 40% recycled content. So I'll give another example as well to just give you like a wild perspective on what's going on. But if you look at this example, you can see the differences in energy that is being used. And where the energy gets to be reduced in quantity is the more you use the product. So, basically, having using plastic. So basically all of the options except the paper one are made out of plastic, except the last one also has some recycled content. And you can see that the least amount of CO2 emissions that are used if we speak about single use, it's about the first one. It's about the cheap, really bad quality single-use plastic bag. But then the more you use it, the more actually it reduces in intensity because, of course, you've compensated for all of these times when another single plastic has been produced. Where it gets really shocking is when you look at the paper that has been, the water that has been used for the paper bag. producing plastic has been optimized so much throughout all these decades that we've been using this product and this material that it allows us to be really efficient with it. Paper bags are not there yet. Paper bags are heavier. Paper bags are also more intense when it comes to, water. And this is where, if we talk about externalities, what I'm trying to get to is that you using one of your tote bags that most of us have probably in the hundreds, which is not added here, it takes 170 times for it to be more sustainable than a paper bag. But if you look at the paper bag here, like this paper bag, it takes another 5 or 6 or 10 times for it to really be more sustainable than all of these other options. And that is not to say, because many of these bags cannot even be recycled and so on, and I'm happy to dive into this example later. But what I'm explaining here is that whenever a product is designed, whenever certain physical or software product is designed, we actually are not calculating most of the times externalities. And this doesn't allow us to see actually the full negative or positive impact that our planet can have from this particular product. And finally, one is really important is education. It is a responsibility, it's not a role. The technology industry does not have the role to educate its employees about sustainability, but actually, I found this quite interesting. This is an answer from Quora, and it was asked there essentially how many people work in the tech industry worldwide, and then the answer was hundreds of millions, and there was a logic behind the calculation. And actually, most likely it's even more because this is an outdated answer given we're now 6 years later. The responsibility of technology in this particular topic is that you, as doesn't matter at what part of the business you're working, have a lot of influence on people, be it because you're developing a B2C product and someone is your consumer and you can tell them the truth about sustainability through your user experience, or be it because you have a team, or maybe you're a team by yourself, but you have a blog and you have like all these different channels through which people can hear your opinion and your vision and also hear the facts. Each one of us at the end of the day is an influencer, and not to say it in this Instagram kind of a way, influencer, but more in a way that you, with your own opinion and with your own vision of how life should be, are influencing the lives of your family, influencing the lives of your friends, and also of the colleagues that you have, be it your employees, people that work under you, or people that work above you. The moment when you feel informed enough about sustainability and you want to take a stance on it, you shouldn't shy away from it, because there's so many people that actually can end up benefiting from that, and this statistic validates this. So where does this leave you? And this is my end of the presentation. Work for companies that take a stance on sustainability. This can really help you on being with aligned values internally and externally to the company, and having a more satisfied job, and also like more fulfillment from your job. Support your company on taking its sustainability journey. I think it sometimes is really difficult for companies because they always think they need to do everything at the same time. Sustainability is a journey in a company. It's not something that happens overnight. So it's totally okay if you take small steps, but take them, because we don't have time. Inform yourself about greenwashing. Greenwashing is a huge problem, and unfortunately is becoming even more prominent. Greenwashing is the idea that you essentially use sustainability for marketing rather than for actual impact. The problem is quite persistent, and I think your company should learn what really means to be carbon neutral, that it's not really possible in the shape and form that it exists at the moment, and so on. All these little things really matter. If you're looking for working on something, work on innovation addressing climate change, we have actually in planning quite a lot of open positions, so give me a call if you're interested. Remember, reduction is the only way forward. Carbon neutrality does not count. None of these offsetting activities really matter if you look at where we're standing in terms of performance at the moment. Our emissions are so high that it's going to take 7 more COVIDs for us to really be able to be on track with our Paris Agreement targets. And finally, manage with sustainability in mind. What ends up being spoken, what ends up being discussed, ends up being implemented. And this is your opportunity to also make other people choose in the right manner for themselves. Thank you so much. And I look forward to learning more about your questions and about you as well.
Thank you very, very much, Lubomila. Now it's your turn. If you have questions for her, please let us know. You can either write them in the chat or you can also just unmute yourself, whatever works best for you.
Simon, I see you've raised your hand, so if you want to go ahead.
I don't know how this works, so.
Just shoot, Simon.
Okay, so yeah, thanks a lot for this talk. I think that's super interesting. Just like one, maybe too large question that came to my mind is, how much does this transparency actually help? So I mean, I'm an economist, I'm a researcher, and my solution to climate change is just like carbon emissions need to be more expensive. Then the market will solve things. Mm-hmm. And you're basically saying, well, we just make consumers more aware of the problem and consumers will solve things. So who is right?
I didn't say that, but I actually am more, I'm aligned with you, and I think it's a blend between two things. So consumer awareness is great, but it's definitely not enough. And I think the main and most effective tactic is legislation. And we've seen it because the only reason why Plan A is at the end of the day is visible and as successful as it is because regulations. And I can thank the Green Deal extensively because we work with a lot of publicly listed companies, also companies that are regulated to report. So this is where this transparency is needed. But, legislation can help a lot if this transparency that is requested from the biggest polluters is also requested from the smallest companies, because the demand from Alibaba ordered plastic bags and so on coming at the millions, produced in China, traveling through all these planes and so on, doesn't always come from the biggest companies. There's just such level of knowledge that can be benefiting our society if it was there. So I think if I can put it in one sentence, consumer awareness is not enough, legislation is not enough, corporate activism or engagement is not enough, and you need basically like a mix of all of these in order for sustainability to be truly implemented within the time frame that this can be good for the planet. So we're aligned.
Any more questions? Samantha or Samantha, you raise your hand, please. Go ahead.
Yes, hello. So my question is, do you know how great the impact of cryptocurrency is at the moment? Because crypto mining is far away from being sustainable, I guess.
Actually, this is a fantastic question. Thank you so much for asking it, Samantha. I was asked a few weeks ago to give an interview for tech media, and they asked me to list, and maybe I can even find somewhere the industries that I listed, to list essentially what was, what were the tech industries that are doing a good job in sustainability, what are kind of doing not so good of a job, and what are doing greenwashing or still are in the process of essentially, working towards becoming sustainable. Cryptocurrencies are incredibly exhausting. An NFT, of the mining of an NFT is the equivalent of the CO2 emissions of an average European citizen for a month, which is mind-blowing. This is, I'm not a crypto expert, but I think NFTs are kind of a luxury. It's a first world solution for funding. It's not something that I think anyone would be using if there was really, a different understanding of responsibility. So I think what could be done there is that, first of all, there's a bit more regulation around that. We know that crypto is all about no regulation, so probably that's not going to make it really easy. But I think there's a need for actually setting some boundaries on having certain kind of emissions boundaries. And this is actually happening on the European Commission level. They're now thinking of putting boundaries for like the finance industry, for financed emissions, for the mining, for coal and all of the different industries. Tech is a bit of a blurry territory because tech is still working without too much oversight from governments, because there's like one label, and this is the ICT industry. And that's something that is quite problematic, because if you look at the tech industry, we're like worlds apart. If you take crypto and then you take, for example, e-mobility or take, for example, social media, then we're talking about a big mix. Maybe I can just list a few industries that also are not doing so well on the sustainability side. Social media, there's still a lot of dubious information about whether all of these servers and all of these data centers are actually with renewable energy. So that's something to be considered. E-mobility, the life cycle analysis of all of these e-scooters that are part of our streets is proving that they're incredibly exhausting. And actually the production happens in a few factories in China for all of these different brands. So, you know, we're again talking about maybe not so efficient way of using resources. Gaming is also not, you know, because all these streaming platforms and so on. And music as well. But I think that's not to point fingers. That's more to say like where there's a lot of opportunity for improvement.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Does anybody else have a question for Lubomila? Yes, there's one.
Hi. Hi, Lou.
Hi, Patrick.
Sharing your insights. I just checked the website of Plan A and skimmed through it. And from what I understood is that you're basically monitoring the resource consumption of companies. As far as my understanding, especially the Scope 3 emissions are very, very hard to monitor. How do you do that?
Thank you so much for the question, Patrick. And this is really important, maybe giving context to those that are not familiar. The GHG protocol, which is the internationally accepted protocol for calculating emissions, gives 3 categories of emissions. Scope 1, this is vehicles and facilities of a company. Scope 2, this is the services used by a company, cooling, heating, energy consumption of all sorts. And then Scope 3 is basically what Patrick refers to, where essentially we're talking about suppliers, travel, commute, work from home, servers, any kind of data, data centers, also all of the goods and services used by a company. For reference, the CO2 emissions of Volkswagen at 98% are at Scope 3. So just, you know, to understand what we're talking about. And there's still companies on this planet that claim carbon neutrality with only Scope 1 and 2. So again, why greenwashing should be discussed. And how we do it is we have, first of all, integrations with the systems of companies. So for example, product fashion companies, and they track quite extensively the amounts of quantities of certain materials that they get from their suppliers. And we translate this into CO2 emissions. So that is one way to get one element of, you know, this is 1 out of 15 scopes of the scope. So 1 out of 15 categories within Scope 3. So for the rest of it, for commute and travel, we have developed our own calculators where we crowdsource the data. For goods and services, we have a predictive element. So we're able to predict where, because literally at that particular category, we're talking about every single piece of drink or food or whatever. Like you ordered a pizza for your office, that's your Scope 3 as well. And the way this got to you. So it gets quite tricky. So there's certain averages you can use for, you know, for Germany, for Berlin even. We get like hyper local normally with our calculations. And essentially the mix of the data of the company, the invitation of third parties on the platform, and also like the fact that we're able to predict some of the data that is missing because of the fact that we have like huge amount of scientists in the company, helps us get to the highest level of accuracy.
That's pretty amazing. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, it's pretty exciting because we have like a really scientifically driven approach. So for all the things that we calculate, first of all, we always cover full scope 3. Like there's some companies that only use the platform for scope 1 and 2 and partially 3 because they maybe a tech company and they don't, no one claims by working with us carbon neutrality just because we don't offer it as we don't believe in that. So, you know, we make sure that we get to the highest level of detail for all of our clients, and we work with pretty complex like mobility, like e-bikes, for example. We work with automotive and so on. It gets pretty tricky, but it's good to have scientists on your side in this kind of cases.
Is it more like you're working with averages? Just to pick one example, like printing paper. You get printing paper in the house, and maybe you get like, I don't know, 100 packages per month, and you're averaging or you're taking the average value for one package of printing paper, or is it like you're watching specifically to the printing paper of this manufacturer? Or I don't know if you want to go this deep into the topic, or if anyone else has questions right now. It's just very interesting to me.
Yeah, I think it's a really good question just to give clarity also on how these things happen. So this example is maybe not so like if the client is a paper company, then their main product is this. So for this, we get to like super detailed level of understanding for each sheet of paper, how much water is consumed, how much fiber is being consumed, is it recycled paper, so what is the processes and so on. And that's like mapping out the whole life cycle of the product itself. For the different types of cases where you're just a random tech company like Plan A that we don't print, but like maybe someone else does, like, okay, a company that prints in their offices, we don't take data on that. We actually add certain estimates that are above the average so that we can get our client to compensate for those that do not compensate in terms of their emissions. But the main idea there is that we focus on, the CO2 emission buckets, which are most exhaustive. So for the banks that we work with, the paper is not the problem, as you can assume. It's for them the problem is that they don't have their emissions for what they financed. So it's there's plenty of things that can be looked at there. So it really is about the production, the products themselves. It's about the finance. So what are the biggest buckets of CO2 emissions? And for the rest of these kind of what we call the low-hanging fruit on these improvements, okay, stop printing because then you don't even have emissions. You get these suggestions on the platform in any case. So you know how to take care of these. So maybe incremental changes in your CO2 emissions, but really important things for the planet, of course.
Thank you. There is, Simon, maybe you go first.
Just following up on that, I was wondering, so you talked a bit about Zalando. What actually counts as like Zalando emissions? I mean, they are just a warehouse with a lot of data scientists. So and now they are offering to, you can buy sustainable clothes there, and then they can always claim, well, people just don't buy it, and that's why the products they sell might have a bad carbon footprint, but it's not their fault because the company is just a warehouse with data scientists that buy things and resell them. So what is counted there?
Yeah, so maybe just for context, because I think this can be of a lot of help for all of us. Just give me a second and I'll share my screen. It's something that I always show also to our clients or potential clients, just to explain how this whole scope 2, 3, gets to be calculated, because then it becomes clear. In a nutshell, you're totally correct. They're a big group of data scientists and also people that are looking into selling clothes, and their responsibility supposedly should not be about looking at the emissions of who they sell, but they've kind of gone. So What I explained is scope 1, 2, 3. So if you look at scope 1, you see what I said earlier. Scope 2 is purchase electricity, steam, heating, cooling. And scope 3 for Zalando, this would be essentially this would be about the business travel, employee commute, investments, because I believe they have some investments. They've made investments into startups. And for the rest of it, I don't know the company in so much detail, but like if they own the, because they have some of the, distribution centers, so transportation and distribution is going to be quite of a big deal. Maybe they've outsourced also fuel and energy related activities. So basically, how do these goods get to travel somewhere? But the processing of goods sold and the use of goods sold, end of life treatment, this is sitting within the CO2 emissions of the fashion company itself. But Zalando having under its management, the distribution, let's assume, because I think they manage also the distribution themselves. They have these warehouses exactly as you said, then this counts towards them. So Zalando as a company, we're going back now into the discussion of what is a role, what is a responsibility. They can decide to only focus what's their role and focus on reducing their own emissions. They've done it the smarter way, where they actually have said we're actually eliminating all of the unsustainable brands from our listings. So they're not going to be selling any of the fast fashion companies. Of course, because we like to focus on science, there's a certain level of methodology that is needed to be considered on how they select who is sustainable and who isn't, because there's a lot of fashion brands that are considered to be sustainable, but they're actually not. And they're like really, at the end of the day, fast fashion. They just have some sort of an eco label on their clothing and so on. So that maybe is the next stage when we're going to be judging them. At this stage, they've made a good choice in terms of adding this label at least, which qualitatively gives you an idea of whether you should choose this one or not.
Silvio has a question and he writes, I heard that France declared atomic energy as sustainable. Is that true? And what could an investor do if he wanted to invest green and follow different meanings of that?
So I think what is important because there's a few questions here. I think if someone is an investor and they want to invest green, first of all, check out the Greentech Alliance. We have 1,000 companies and they've all been checked by scientists if they are sustainable. And I'm putting in the chat the link. We do have a lot of companies that are early stage looking for funding. So, please get in touch, and actually anyone can get in touch with me. That's not only limited to the investor. And I think I think when you talk about like good sustainable investments, what really matters is to consider all these things that I mentioned. When a product is designed, even in the sustainability sphere, quite often it gets to forget the externalities. All these tote bags that they've been given to us as the most sustainable option. And I think that's not always the case. That's not always that's not always the 100% truth. So I would say look at externalities, look at a really solid team, look at an actual problem that climate change relates to. And what this means is that having sustainable business cards is a nice to have solution that probably is not the most optimal way of substituting how we do things now. Having a product that is able to, or an algorithm that is able to distinguish by photos and what kind of waste we're talking about and so on, is, an interesting innovation to look at. And in terms of maybe nuclear energy, as you said, like the pros are that it's carbon-free electricity. It's small in terms of land footprint, and then it's reliable baseload electricity source. On the negative side, of course, it's the uranium is technically non-renewable. There's a lot of upfront costs, and also there's a lot of waste that gets to be, kept somewhere in the land, and we don't even know, we cannot even predict what are going to be the outcomes of this, and it's highly fuelable. So like of course, there's pros and cons. I'm not to speak against France's decision. I can only give you the factual perspective on. I think nuclear is a viable alternative to consider. We still haven't figured out the good mix. As you can see, like coal is the major source worldwide, and China keeps on building coal plants. So there's still a lot of work, and probably we should use whatever we have to maximize our opportunity to be sustainable.
Thank you. From the energy sources to tourism, Manuela asked, what's the impact of tourism, like flying and cruising?
So tourism is non-existent these days, so it doesn't really matter what the impact is. Sorry, speaking from the perspective of not moving to Berlin from Berlin for a year and a bit. Basically, what is to be considered when it comes to travel, transportation is a really big source of negative impact, and that's something that we need to be mindful. And I think the big issue with travel is first of all flying. That's the most unsustainable way of traveling. Second close is cruising. Like if you take all these cruise ships, like they're polluting our planet, and unfortunately, because our waters cannot speak. We don't even have the full picture on the amount of damage we have done to our water ecosystem. Our oceans are actually not only with higher temperatures, but there's also acidification that we can see. And there's a lot of this to do with actual pollution from all these cruise ships, all these cargo ships, and all the different types of things. So every little decision you make to order something on Amazon and then it ends up traveling from China to get to you is something that has costed, has been a little angle of a little box of a huge cruise ship or cargo ship. Hopefully not cruise ship. I don't know if they use them for that as well. Maybe it's actually a good idea. Then it's optimizing resources. Never mind. But basically, what I would say is like traveling is the worst. Second thing that is quite bad is you might be quite shocked is waste. When we travel, we're normally not equipped well enough to be well prepared for all the things that we want to do. So we buy things and they're packaged, and it's be it food that we don't finish, be it things that we buy because we didn't calculate that we needed them, be it all the single-use plastic, toiletries, and so on. And when you put all these things together, waste actually is one of the second streams. If you combine all the hotel waste that needs to be created, all the restaurant waste, plus all your individual consumption. And then one that is actually close to equal to waste is water. It's really exhausting to be a tourist, and that is related to the fact that when you're in a hotel, they actually wash the towels and the sheets and all these kinds of things. There's a lot of cleaning involved that happens on a daily basis, and all these things that normally in your house you don't have the expectation that every single day you would have like a pitch perfect reality. And of course, like all of the cleaning after restaurants and so on. So tourism is a great thing. I miss it dearly, but I think it just needs to be a bit more mindful when we do it.
Thank you very much. There might be space for one last very quick question. So does anybody want to ask a last question, or are you all ready to enjoy your evening somewhere outside in the sun and warmth? Lubomila, looks like you have already answered all of the questions. Well, thank you very much for your insights. And
I think Christian is typing, so I don't know.
Typing. Oh, Christian.
He was closing off, so it's all good.
Yes, thank you. I also say thank you for all your great insights. Maybe do you have a recommendation where we can get more information on the topic, must reads, podcasts, something like that?
So I would recommend the Plan A Academy. This is the place where we've published more than 300 unique pieces that are I put it in the chat, that are dedicated to educating individuals and businesses on how to be more sustainable. But we literally go into explaining like certain legislations, but also explain like what does really emissions mean, what is the effect of blockchain on, actually this may be a good place for Samantha to learn further. And another one, and I would like to invite you all, is we do a set of series called Meet the Giants. And Meet the Giants is actually a series where we invite the chief sustainability officers of the biggest companies. And why this is useful is because it gives you a perspective on how do you do this at scale. You don't need to have that big of a company. That's no need for that. Just trying to find the link. But what it allows you to learn is, and then we have all of these episodes on YouTube. So if you want to learn about Atos, Salesforce, we have the Chief Sustainability Officer of Salesforce Global. We have upcoming Swedbank. So if you want to learn about the banking sector and sustainability, Swedbank is really phenomenal. They really are doing so much in terms of sustainability, and I'm going to give you the link now. So it's on the 26th of May, and you can join there. I think these two resources are good to start with, and if you ever have questions and you want to chat, please feel free to add me on LinkedIn. I'm always really happy to help anyone with any kind of insight and any kind of network related to the topic. I think there's plenty that needs to be done by all of us, and always happy to help.
Thank you very much, and I hope you have a great rest of the week ahead of you. Thank you, Lubomila. Thank you, all the attendants tonight. That was a great talk. I enjoyed it very much.
Thank you so much. Bye bye.